Welcome. Raising Your Game today. I'm David Levin. This is our Friday episode, so we're talking about the inner game of life. Tuesdays are for the middle game of sports and competition. Fridays are for the rest of our lives. So, how is your middle game this week? How are you doing? I hope you're feeling good, enjoying life. Things are good here. Not much to report. Again, interesting how that happens now and then. You just get in a groove and things move along and nothing really much of note happens. And that doesn't mean it's boring or unfulfilling or aimless or anything like that. It's just the normal day-to-day rhythms of our life. So that's what our last couple of weeks have been like, separate from all the crazy news, of course. I hope yours is going well, too. So some things to talk about this week. JD Vance and his strange and disturbing, really, attacks on people without children. Trump's epically awful interview with the Association of Black Journalists. That was fun. His frightening comments to a Christian group about not having to vote in the future. I'll share a lovely and helpful little Zen story I love, another communication tip, and another album I love. This one from Randy Newman. Great, great artist. All right, we'll start with ups and downs. So what gave me a lift this week and what things were pulling me down? First, this one just came in this morning as I sat down to write this. But apparently, the Washington Post journalist, Evan Gershkovich, hope I'm saying that right, who's been held illegally in Russia for over a year, is being released this morning. That is really good news. Great for him and his family, of course, above all. But also, it's a loss for Trump, which makes me happy. Trump tried to make this about him recently. It was so gross. He posted a video saying Evan would likely be released after Trump was elected because Putin would do that for him, for Trump, but not do it for anyone else. So that was just so awful and basically signaling to Putin, please keep him in custody for another 6 months to help me with the election. Of course, no concern for Evan himself, just pretending he cared about that. It was really just, how can it help me? Right? Typical disgusting Trump. So having him be released now, while Biden is still president, and with everything else looking bad for Trump lately, is just extra sweet. I look forward to him saying something stupid about that. I'm sure he will soon. Speaking of which, his unbelievably bad interview at the Association of Black Journalists also sort of made me happy in a similar way. This is the one where he tore into one interviewer for asking him what was truly just a good, solid journalist question. He never answered the question, just melted down in his childish victimhood way for all to see. Then he went on to say, and this part I'm sure you've heard, that Kamala Harris started out as Indian, South Asian, and one day just turned black. Is she Indian? Is she black? He said, I don't know. I think someone should probably look into that. First, what do you mean look into that? Her father was Jamaican. Her mother was from India. Everyone knows that. She celebrates her Indian heritage, of course, and she was raised as part of the black community. The interview was scheduled to run for an hour. His staff pulled him off after 35 minutes. It was just a disaster, and I loved it. Of course, he's now saying he crushed it. He's doubling down on questioning her heritage and her identity. All his Republican supplicants are playing along. But again, separate from how awful the substance of it is, it still sort of makes me happy because it reminds people what a truly horrible person he is, just at a basic, fundamental level. He's horrible. There's genuinely something wrong with that guy. And I expect it's only going to get worse and more obvious as her poll numbers rise and she gets the attention that he thinks he should be getting. So that was fun. Another political up for me was that I joined the White Dudes for Kamala Zoom call. Maybe you heard about that. The Zoom call craze started the week before, I think, with the big one with black women for Kamala. Then white women had one. I think they had over 200,000 people on the call. And they're fundraisers, so they're bringing in millions of small donations, which is great. So when I heard about this one for white dudes, I wanted to see what it would be like. And it was overall pretty great. You know, there was criticism, like why not all dudes? And to be honest, I don't really get that. The underlying idea was that white men are, stereotypically a certain way. Trump supporters are mostly white men. The Republicans have been pushing this toxic version of masculinity. Hulk Hogan tearing his shirt at the convention. He's just such a cartoon character. The whole vision is so artificial. Anyway, this group wanted to stand up and say, of course, that's not what all white men think or feel or believe. And I don't see how that's anything but good. It felt good to me. I can say that. The first speaker, this was fun. It was Jeff Bridges, the Big Lebowski, the dude. He said, yeah, a friend told me about this. I thought, well, I'm white. I'm the dude. And I'm for Kamala. So I'm in. That was just funny. Many great speakers. Pete Buttigieg, Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota. I'll tell you what, that guy is good. I'm really liking his vibe, the way he takes the case to Trump. He's real, he's funny. He's the one that got the whole he's weird thing going. And the more I see him, the more I like him. I think he'd be a great VP pick. We'll know about that in a few days. But anyway, that was another happy thing this week. And I'm still feeling very positive and hopeful about the whole Kamala movement. For the downs, I've just been feeling a little off the past few days. Nonspecific, just tired, the gut is weird. It's a little different, but I played pickleball the other day outdoor in the heat, and that really kicked my butt. This was really weird part of that. I honestly thought I'd broken my foot for most of that day. It was not heat related, just another way it beat me up. I was limping. I really could just hardly even walk around the house. And then it just sort of went away. I still have no idea what that was about. But it just reminded me in general that anything being off physically really puts a big weight on everything else. Everything's harder. It can make you worried depending on what it is. It's just a classic high gravity situation. Anyway, those are my ups and downs for the week. A few sort of twisted political ups and some physical stuff pulling me down just a bit. All right, next up, top stories. Another thing that's likely making Trump unhappy this week is all the attention on his vice president pick, JD Vance, and the crazy, nasty things he's saying about women. I assume you've heard about this. He just has this very weird and deep ill feeling towards people who don't have kids. It's really wild to hear how strongly he feels about this. There's the childless cat lady thing, but even worse, he actually said people without children should have less political voice. Their votes should literally count less. Each child should be granted a vote, and their parents should get to cast those votes. So people with kids would actually get more votes. It's just so stupid and anti-democratic and weird, and it feels like he really means it. It's not just him, being the crazy right-wing troll. So for Trump, this is bad because it makes it harder for him to distance himself from the weird, extreme anti-abortion crowd, really the anti-women crowd. That's a huge problem for him. It makes it hard to distance himself from Project 2025 because Vance is their poster boy. Probably worst of all, though, from Trump's perspective, JD is getting the attention. That is the ultimate sin in Trump world. I saw a poll this week. JD is officially the worst VP nominee ever, based on his polling, his popularity. Okay, that's nice. But really the core of this, and it's funny, but it's really not too, is this deep-rooted animosity toward women as equals, to see how deeply they believe in taking things backwards socially. It's good to get it out there in the open, but it's also chilling. It truly is the Handmaid's Tale. I mean, do you have any doubt that if they had full control of government, that they would take us backwards? Can there be any doubt about that? The more we hear, the clearer it gets. And speaking of that, you may have also heard about Trump's comments at that Christian gathering where he said, Christians, you have to vote, but just this time. In 4 years, you won't have to. We'll have it fixed by then. What do you suppose he meant by that? You won't have to worry about voting next time. We'll have it all fixed by then. Remember, the main driver for Trump of winning this election is simply to stay out of jail. And that threat doesn't go away forever if he wins. It only stays away while he's in office. So given that, do you honestly think he would hesitate for a second to try to stay in power beyond a second term if he wins this time? I've heard it said that you can get a lot of clarity on a movement by thinking about what they would do if they were in power. I think that's super helpful in this context. If Democrats were in control, we would see a fairer, more open, supportive, and forward-looking society. Support for working families, childcare, healthcare, voting rights, smart immigration policies, fairer taxes to pay for it all, better schools, climate, just across the board, a stronger, healthier, more democratic country. If Republicans were in control, all of that would go away. They would turn us into a minority rule state where Christian extremist views are imposed on all of us. It sounds crazy, but when you listen to JD Vance, you read Project 2025, and you think for even a moment about Trump's damaged psychology, you know it is exactly true. That's what they would do, and there's no doubt about it. I heard recently that historically, Germany was the most progressive and vibrant and forward-looking society in Europe. Germany, through all of history, there was just this one outlier, crazy 12-year period where it all went to shit. Do not think that can't happen here. It absolutely can, and it likely will, unless we stand up and stop it. So the message again is, please do what you can and do it now. Margaret and I, honestly, a little late to this probably. This past week, we sat down, talked about it. What can we do to help this time? We have to be able to look back and feel like we did our part. So we're not canvassers. It's not our style. We're not going door to door. Probably not taking shifts at the local Democratic office. Last time I helped out a bit with the website for our county party. But anyway, we ultimately decided that what we can do is to donate to the Wisconsin State Party and a lot more than we've ever done before. So please, if you haven't already, think about what you can do this time and do it right away. We have less than 100 days to win this thing. The time is now. If you don't have ideas already for how to help, I'll put in a link for Vote Save America. They have a bunch of great choices, resources. You can donate or sign up to volunteer in many different ways all across the country. And then just imagine how it will feel on November 6th to have defeated once and for all this crazy piece of shit and all the trouble he brings with him. To have him gone from our political lives from then on. Man, oh man, what's that worth? What would you give to have that be true? That's the question, and the time is now. All right, that's Top Stories. Next up, Inner Game Gold. Last week, we talked about a new piece of Inner Game Gold. You can't want part of someone's life without wanting all their life. That's super helpful to remember. This week, I want to bring in another new idea, which is one of my favorite Zen koans. If you don't know, koans are little stories that help you click out of your normal way of thinking and see the reality of how your mind works. The dictionary definition of a Zen koan is, quote, a paradoxical anecdote or riddle used in Zen Buddhism to demonstrate the inadequacy of logical reasoning and to provoke enlightenment, end quote. I would add to that the inadequacy of logical reason as a method of attaining enlightenment, meaning normal thinking won't get you there. Something needs to click, and these little stories are designed to create that click. Anyway, this particular story is the two monks were walking along together, a senior monk and a junior monk. And I'm paraphrasing with all of this, but they came upon a flooded stream, and there was a beautiful young woman there who asked for help getting across. So the senior monk picked her up, carried her across the stream, gently set her down, and they continued on their way. The junior monk was scandalized by this because all monks take a vow to not touch a woman, so they walked in silence for a long time. Finally, when he could no longer contain himself, the junior monk spoke up. I can't believe you did that, he said. You know we're forbidden to touch women. How could you do such a thing? And the senior monk replied, Brother, I set her down back there. Why are you still carrying her? That's a good one. So the point is, which is the greater offense to their Buddhist devotion? Helping a young woman in the moment or spending hours stuck in your head? And the answer is clear. the greater offense by far, and not because it's disobedient, but because it increases our suffering and makes it harder to serve the people in our lives, is when we allow ourselves to get stuck in our heads, when we allow our big crazy brains to be in control of our thoughts and actions. That is the number one challenge we all face in wanting to be our best, and this little story is a great reminder of that. So I hope you enjoyed that. I recommend you keep it around and revisit it from time to time. It just makes it so clear, I think. You might also want to grab a book of Zen koans. I'll put a link to one in the notes. They can be really enjoyable and also, of course, very helpful. For more mental game insights and more modern insights, check out the Raise Your Inner Game book if you haven't read that yet. There's a link here. Of course, if you play sports, check out the Sports Academy training. It's perfect for that. Either way, that's our newest Inner Game Gold for this week, a lovely Zen koan about the two monks and the maiden. All right, next up, raise your outer game. Last week, we talked about a relationship-building communication tip that you should try to keep the focus on the other person in a conversation, and most important, reflect back to them the emotions in what they're saying. That's a super powerful skill to develop. This week, another communication tip. This one is for email. Now, if you're a younger person, you might not use email. You might even mock those of us who do. That's okay. But if you're like me and you do use a lot of email, this is a good tip. So the general concept behind it is that email is especially bad at communicating any kind of emotion and connection. That's why emojis have taken off so much. We naturally want to communicate the emotional element and those things and just connect in general in what we're saying, but it just takes too much work to figure out how to do it in words alone. It's really hard to do. And then the problem is when you remove the connection of face-to-face or voice-to-voice conversations, it's super easy to misread the message as being more negative or angry or upset or judgment, whatever, than it actually is, which means you're hurting your relationship without realizing it. So this tip is designed to keep that from happening. It's super simple. I call it the love cookie, which is pretty dumb, but I still like it. You should picture an Oreo cookie with 2 layers outside around a creamy middle. So the idea is you want to open and close your email with something that has some emotional connection element. Those are the outside chocolate layers of the cookie. And then tuck the message itself, the creamy middle, in between. And when I say emotional connection, I don't mean personal necessarily or deeply emotional or anything like that. Just something that speaks to the emotional reality of the moment. For example, you're asking someone at work for a report. You say, "Hey, hope you're doing well. I'm sure it's busy over there, but if possible, I could really use that report by this Thursday. Thanks. Appreciate your help, David." So you see, the opening cookie is, "Hope you're doing well. I'm sure it's busy over there." So you're pointing out that you've thought about them, you understand that they're busy, and you know you're asking for something that adds to their load. It's just a few words, but you're sending that message. And that message that you understand and you care, even in this little context, makes it much easier for them to hear you and want to help you with your request. The request itself is just, "Can I get that report by Thursday?" And the connection/cookie at the end is, "Appreciate the help." As a comparison, if you sent that same request without the opening and closing cookies, the message would sound more like this: "Hey, can I get that report by Thursday? David." You feel the difference? It's night and day. And over time, you'll really feel the difference in the strength of your relationships because you spent a little time wrapping your messages in a tasty little bit of connection love. So that's the love cookie. In email messages, open and close with some sort of emotional connection, and then put the message itself in between there. To learn more about that and other communication tips, check out Don't Just Talk, Be Heard. I'll put a link to that below. Otherwise, that's our Raise Your Outer Game for this week. Another surprisingly effective communication tip. All right, next up, our challenge of the week. This week, let's work on that. Every time you send an email this week, if it's appropriate, try adding some sort of connection to the beginning and ending of your email. Now, maybe you do this already. If so, that's great. But if not, give it a try. It does take a few more minutes to do, especially at first. But I think you really feel the difference, especially over time. Anyway, check it out. Have fun with it. See what you think. Bonus challenge, if you haven't done it yet, decide what you are going to do to help elect Kamala and defeat Trump, and start doing that right away as well. All right, next up, highly recommended. This week, I want to talk about another album I revisited this past week. This is from Randy Newman. Most people know him from his theme from the Toy Story movie, You Got a Friend in Me. If you're closer to my age, you might remember from the 70s, the song Short People Got No Reason. That was such a big deal at the time. I loved that song. A bit later, 80s, I think, he had a hit with I Love L.A. It's a very distinct style, New Orleans-y piano, funny sort of a half-spoken singing voice. One detail you likely wouldn't know, there was a song way back by Three Dog Night. That's a long time ago. Big hit for them. Mama Told Me Not to Come. That's also a Randy Newman song, and you can totally hear that once you're listening for it. But anyway, this album, Land of Dreams, is just next level genius all the way through. The thing with him is, as a writer, most of his pieces are some sort of social commentary. And he's very pointed and sharp and unflinching with it. The singer in the songs is usually a character speaking, and there are many layers to it. The music itself, the melody, the form, but then the production, they're all intentional parts of the total piece. They're almost like little mini movies in that way. One example, there's a song on this record called Four Eyes. It's big and dramatic sounding, bold, tense. There's a story being told. By the end, you realize the story is a little kid talking about going to his first day of school, kindergarten, I assume, like 6 years old. And all the drama and the bombast in the music is just illustrating the intensity of the feelings and the emotions of this scared little kid. It's hilarious and sort of heartbreaking and just crazy good. And the whole record is just like that. Beautiful, harsh at times, genius all the way down. So that is highly recommended this week. Land of Dreams, Randy Newman. Love that record. Programming note, I'm away on vacation next week up at the cabin with the family. Very much looking forward to that. So there'll be no pod episodes next week. Apologies for that. But, sometimes you just got to take some personal time, right? But we'll be back again the week after that for sure. So I hope you have lovely 2 weeks until then. In the meantime, remind you to check out the Raise Your Inner Game book for more mental game goodness, or the Sports Academy training to take your game to a higher level. Links to everything in this week's notes as usual. Otherwise, that's it for this week. I hope you have a great 2 weeks. Keep up the good work. I'll talk to you next time.